In our oral history series. WCBL Radio sponsoring, along with owner Shelby McCallum, the program in Marshall County for the Marshall County Library, and also to be used by the Pogue Library at Murray State University for this region, and a copy to be deposited with the State Archives in Frankfort, Kentucky. We're visiting Ms. Ray Collie on the Oak Level Road, just at the edge of Benton, and it's a good thing that you've invited us into your home. Miss Collie, do you object to telling us how old you are?
No, I'm 79.
At that ripe age, we'll say you should have a good many memories, and we're going to try to get you to tell us some of the things about how life has changed and so on. Your parents were whom?
Norman Collie and Monty McDaniel Collie.
So your mother was a McDaniel?
Yes.
Were they both from Marshall County?
No, my mother was from Benton County, Tennessee.
That's where they say good sorghum molasses,
That's right.
Isn't it? The world's champion, according to them at least. Did your mother ever talk about those molasses?
Yes, I've heard her talk about them.
Very good. Do you remember anything about your grandparents?
Yes, my grandmother was Elizabeth McLeod, and my grandfather was Larkin Collie.
All right, the McLeods were also from Marshall County, I believe.
No, they came from Ohio.
Came from Ohio.
My great-great-grandfather came from Ohio and started to build a grist mill out on Jonathan Creek, just below where 68 crosses it. And he and Mr. Frizzell came from Ohio, and my grandfather took pneumonia and died, and he was buried right up on top of the hill from where they were building the mill. And my great-grandfather came later and settled on some land that the great-great-grandfather had bought, and that's out where McLeod Point is on the lake.
Quite an interesting story. That's sort of in the neighborhood of where my father was born, and my father and mother are buried at Barnett Cemetery.
Well,
That's in the general neighborhood of the
yes,
place
it
you're
is.
speaking, isn't it? It was unfortunate that your grandfather was not able to carry out his intended wishes, but...
Well, he didn't get to come, but his wife and son and his family did move to Kentucky.
And they then operated the mill.
No, see, my grandfather died before they got it
Oh,
built.
I see.
Mr. Frizzell went ahead and built the mill, and that where the old highway crossed the Jonathan Creek was called the Frizzell Bridge.
Right along about where Henry and Lex Byers lived, and Kelsey Warren.
It's out on this side, going out 68.
68 instead of 80. Yes,
Yeah, 68.
yes. I had the wrong. I had the wrong place in mind there at the time. All right, you were born in the county?
Yes, near Birmingham,
Where did you go to school?
Cleveland.
At Well, you mean there was a one-room grade school in Marshall County by the name of Cleveland?
That's right.
Okay, now that's something I've learned for the first time.
Between Fairdealing and Birmingham.
Well, great. See, we just uncover more bits of good information.
The old school, before that one was built, was called Shoe Fly.
All right.
And then when they built the new building, well, it was Cleveland.
Exactly the types of things we're looking for. Do you remember any of your teachers?
Yes. Miss Mamie Beasley was my first teacher. And then Mr. Hugh Edwards taught a couple of years. And Java Gregory.
I believe I've heard of Java Gregory.
Oh, yes, he
Yes,
was county
he had.
judge.
Now, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
John Lawrence's father.
Mm-hmm.
And Charlie Ray Holland. And Monty Collie. And Ethel Collie.
Mm-hmm. Were they any relatives of yours?
Yes, they were distantly related.
Uh-huh.
Well, Monty was an own cousin.
Tell us about school. What was it like? Wasn't a log building then?
No, it wasn't a log building. It was built, I guess I'd gone to school for a couple of years, shoe fly, and then they built the new building.
Oh, did you have a favorite subject in school?
Yes, I guess reading and English.
Reading and English and spelling and so on. Did you have spelling bees?
Yes, we had spelling bees.
During the year, they'd usually, a lot of the country schools would have some fundraising activities like pie suppers.
Well, we didn't there. Later on, I went to Union Ridge. I finished 8th grade at Union Ridge, and we did have pie suppers and box suppers and things like that to raise money.
Now, that is more east of Hardin there, wasn't it? Sort of? Union Ridge?
Yes, it's a Union Ridge.
Mm-hmm. How far was that from Unity?
Oh, I guess 3 or 4 miles.
Yeah. Today, we think of them as being fairly close together. I guess they weren't.
I've heard my stepfather talk about his wife and the family walking from there to Unity to church. It was quite a distance, but they'd walk.
Uh-huh. People got a lot of walking in those days. Maybe.
I thought it was funny. He said they would walk barefoot till they got almost to the church, and then they'd sit down and put on their shoes.
Keep from wearing them out.
Keep from wearing them out.
Exactly the type of thing we're looking for, Miss Collie. In fact, I think I've practiced that a few times. It was not only to save the wear and tear on the shoes, but frequently, when you just wore your shoes once a week, as I did, it tended to make your feet sore and blister your heels and so on. They didn't always fit exactly right anyway.
Well, that's opposed to the Japanese custom. They wear shoes until they get there, then they take the shoes off.
Could you tell us anything about the games you played at school, maybe?
Oh, we played wolf over the river and stealing sticks and London Bridge is falling down. And
you're the first one that's mentioned London Bridge, but I remember playing that myself. I guess that goes way, way back to England.
And there was a lot of trees on the school ground, and we enjoyed playing bass. So we have a tree for our bass, you know. And
when you're on base, you couldn't be touched.
You couldn't be caught, but when you got off a base, you could. The one that left his base last could catch you.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a little bit like the cities of refuge
Yes, I guess it is.
In Old Testament times. I know a type of being in or out of the church, I suppose. And what was it David said about Abner? Abner died as the fool died. He went to the city of refuge, but he didn't go inside. He leaned up against the door facing. And his enemy came after him, and stuck a sword to him. He was pretty close, but he wasn't inside, so he had to be on base. All right, after you had finished school and were a young lady, what did young people do for recreation then? Did you go to play parties? Or?
Yes, we had play parties. Some people had dances. I never did go to very many of them, but it's a lot of fun to go to a play party.
Yeah, play games. I can remember going to one time. They were about to quit having them by the time I was growing up, but I vaguely recall something about buffalo gals or chase the buffalo or
Buffalo gals, won't you come out tonight?
Yeah. All right.
Tidy-o.
Did you, were you married?
No, I've never married.
Where did you begin your first work?
At Cleveland.
At Cleveland.
I graduated from high school at Benton.
And you got a teacher certificate.
Yes, by examination at that time.
Someone, I believe it might have been Tessie Smith, saying to me when I interviewed her that there were 3 grades of certificates, and you could
First, second, and third.
and you got those really right out of the 8th grade. And then later, if you went to high school, you could get them renewed and extended.
I taught my first year on a certificate earned by examination.
I suppose.
And I hadn't finished at the high school at that time. I had just had 3 years of high school before when I began teaching.
You remember anything about how many students you had in the one room?
Well, I imagine around 40 the first year I taught. One year when I taught at Heights, I had 64. And then when I moved to Brownsburg to teach, that was the year that the dam was turned on, and Birmingham was moving out, you know. And the first day of school, I had 76 children in my room.
76 in one room?
In one room.
Were you still teaching 8 grades then?
No, we had 3 teachers. Well, we just had 2 then, but they got busy and built us a room in 3 weeks and got another teacher and divided us up a little bit. The first grade teacher had over 40 in her room, and I had 76 in mine. And I took them out in the yard. It was in July, and I guess it'd be in September, but it was awfully hot, and I didn't have seats enough for near all of them, so I just took them out in the yard, and we sat on the ground till they could haul us some seats for Birmingham.
Yeah, well, that's just a marvelous story. So when they were building Kentucky Dam, there was an inrush of population, and that affected the school system,
Yes,
of course.
it did.
And you weren't really prepared for it.
No.
You had to have.
Of course, a lot of them from Birmingham moved on out of the district later on, but they hadn't moved yet, and we had to take care of them.
Certainly. Well, did you have very much of a discipline problem with
No,
them?
I didn't. I don't see how I managed that many without problems, but they were nice children, and I didn't have very much trouble with them.
In the earlier days when one teacher taught all the grades, you even if you had only 25, you still, some of those classes, you were teaching 5 or 6 subjects, weren't you?
Yeah.
Had English and spelling and arithmetic. And
the 7th and 8th grade were usually combined. One year you taught the 7th grade, next year you taught the 8th.
then you'd have health.
Yes. Agriculture.
And you'd have geography.
Geography, English, history.
History, that's right. So you had about 8 subjects.
Uh-huh.
And by the time you ran through even 7 grades...
You didn't have over 15 minutes for a class.
Yeah.
I don't see how they learned anything, but they did.
But you were in school longer. Now, I
Yes.
noticed the elementary schools now get out a little after 2.
And we rang the bell at 8 o'clock and got out at 4.
Yeah, stayed all the way through except for the lunch and the short recess period. Yeah. Did you play with the children on the school
Yes,
grounds?
I did. Played ball.
What, you started school pretty early. I can remember starting in July for a 5-month term. And
Well, I think that I always went 6 months, and then later on it got to be 7 months.
what about the janitor? Did you have...
Well, I was my own janitor. I swept the floor and built the fire and carried on all parts.
Did you have running water?
No. We had a cistern.
Yeah, you had to have a bucket and
Bucket
a
and
dipper and so on.
We'd never heard of a germ.
All right. Moving on from that, we'd like to ask you about what the churches were like in that time. Were they any different in any particular?
Well, not particularly.
You remember any funny instance? You never went to sleep and fell out and rolled down the aisle or anything like that?
No, they've always laughed at me. Old Brother Pace was preaching in Birmingham, and that's where we attended church. And one night Mother said I was just a little over a year old, but said I could talk just as plain as I can now, and said I began to get sleepy, and I wanted something, and I wanted a drink. And said she whispered to me and told me that they didn't have any water there. I'd have to wait till we went home. And said I just said out big and loud, "Well, you ought to give me a drink before we left home." And said Brother Pace said that got him so tickled that he could hardly carry on his sermon.
Yeah. I imagine pioneer preachers could tell some interesting stories also. Do you remember any other preachers besides Pace?
Brother Wiley Mathis preached in Birmingham for years.
You know, I happen to be acquainted with that fellow. He was from near Vienna, Illinois, wasn't
That's
he?
right.
I remember he'd bring some good honey with him sometimes.
Well, he was a good preacher, I thought.
And what were the roads like in those days?
Oh, in the wintertime, if you carried a load, you had to have 4 mules hitched to your wagon.
Bottomless, practically.
That's right.
Did your father raise tobacco or anything?
Yes, he was a farmer. He raised tobacco, and corn, sorghum.
Did you ever have to sucker any?
No, I never did have to work in it.
Well, we were talking to some lady, and she was telling me that she didn't like that particularly, but the thing that bothered her the most was when those worms got about the size of your finger and clucked at you.
My father died when I was 10 years old, so I didn't know too much about the farm.
Do you remember any county officials?
Well, yes. I remember Judge Joel Price.
All right.
I remember he gave me a nickel when I was 5 years old, and I still have it.
Well, that's quite a record, isn't it? It certainly is.
And the house burned on it, and it was stolen once, and I got it back. I don't know why I set such store by it, but my daddy and Judge Price were second cousins, and they thought a lot of each other. And he carried me up to the courthouse, and we was talking to Judge Price, and he gave me a nickel. And I guess
his son is judge now.
guess because my daddy thought so much of him, I prized that nickel, and I've always kept it.
Yes, I know. I knew Judge Price. I knew Brandon. No,
Yeah,
Brandon,
Brandon.
of course. He's Judge Price in McCracken County, one of the 2 districts in that county. Well, what about medical remedies in those days? Did your mother have any favorite way of fending off disease?
Oh, yes, she put a flannel cloth on my chest when I had a bad cold.
I'd mix a little Vic Salve with it or
Yes.
something.
I don't believe we had Vic Salve back then, but
What about, someone has mentioned to me that they always drank sassafras tea.
yes, my mother and daddy liked it.
And that
I
kept
never
you-
did care for it.
Others have mentioned that asafoetida was a sure.
Oh, yes, when measles were scattered around, my grandmother'd get up some asafoetida and tie it up in a little rag and put it around my neck, and I had to wear it.
Did you like the smell
No,
of that?
I didn't. And my mother hated it worse than I did. But grandmother thought I had to have it.
All right, what do you remember when you got your first radio or when you listened to your first radio?
Yes, I believe I do. I don't remember the date, but Roy Rudolph bought one, and
Did it have a loudspeaker or
Yeah.
earphones?
Loudspeaker.
Loudspeaker.
And I think that's the first one I heard.
Right, and then, of course, television came along, and
Yes.
that's a good way to pass away some time, I guess. All right, Shelby has been coming in on every one of our programs and saying a few words. Shelby, we'd like for you to move over here.
Yes, I'll be glad to. I certainly appreciate the invitation to come by and visit with you this morning. And I'm going to ask you a question that I've asked 14 other people. If you had your life to live over again, would you still select Marshall County?
Yes, I think I would.
Well, that makes it 100%. Everyone has said that. What do you think the biggest changes have been in Marshall County?
Well, I guess the dam brought the biggest change.
Yes, I guess you're right. And the industry in Calvert City. Well, it's certainly been a pleasure talking with you, and we want to again thank you for permitting us to visit you and be your guest this morning.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Shelby. And is there anything as we sign off that you'd like to say? We have about another minute left.
No, I don't think so.
No particular tale you want to record for benefit of history?
No, I don't think so.
Well, we certainly, I'll add my thanks to those of Shelby for Mrs. Ray Collie's hospitality here just at the edge of Benton on the Oak Level Road. We've been visiting in her home in the continuing series of oral history recordings, which are being made possible by a grant from WCBL Radio. Ray Mofield and Shelby McCallum have been your interviewers today, and the program is produced in the interest of the Marshall County Library, the Pogue Oral History Library at Murray State University, and the State Archives in Frankfort, Kentucky. And that concludes our broadcast for today.